Trespassing in a Child's Head Unwillingly by Kitty Cat on AO3. Chapter 22. Like Mother, Like Son. I made it to the finals, Izuku said, sitting at the table with the rest of them. I did it by myself and without any of you switching up for it. He tried to set up a match how they all looked, like they belonged. You have to tell me the truth now. Izuku, Nana started, smiling at him softly, as if there wasn't the thing beside her, the thing which looked so much like All Might did. I don't. 7, Yoichi said quickly, and she quieted instantly. She cast him a look before turning to face Yoichi. He stared at Izuku from across the table, his lips set in a grim line. You promised me. Izuku's fist tightened on the table. You promised me that if I made it to the finals, you would tell me. Yoichi didn't argue, just sitting still. He finally sighed, rubbing at the bridge of his nose. You're right. Of course you are. He looked back up, smiling grimly. We've tried to protect you since we came to you. We've been all sheltered you as much as we could, but things are changing. You're getting older, and you're putting yourself into unnecessary danger. I don't, Izuku started before being interrupted. You shouldn't have taken the kid, Izuku, Kuro said with his usual commanding presence. You risked your life and the life of Katsuki because of it. You should have been able to understand. I wasn't going to leave her, Izuku said before he could get scolded anymore. She was in danger. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just trying to save her, Daigoro said softly. Kid, just listen right now, okay? Let them talk. We only have until they wake you up. You know how unpredictable the time passes here. Izuku bit his lip before nodding numbly. His thumb dug into his other hand as he forced himself to keep his focus on Yoichi. Would you have saved her if we weren't there? If we were never there? Of course, Izuku said before stopping himself. He hesitated before shaking his head. No, I wouldn't have. I probably would have trusted him, or I don't know, he whispered. She's the only reason we agreed to do this one, Kuro said, placing a hand on Yoichi's. We all know we can't protect you forever, and it's time we were honest. Izuku nodded, looking back at Yoichi as he sighed. When you looked us up, how much did you find about us on there? Izuku hesitated. Not much. I mean, I know Coop too. He changed what he said at Yoichi's tired expression, clearing his throat. I know he led the Quirk revolution before all of everything. I mean, before the Quirk awakening era. Uji. Kuro scoffed, shaking his head. Jesus, is that what they're calling it now? Lame. Yoichi shot him a look and he quieted, though he grinned slightly. I was here first. For anyone. This plane is neither death nor life. It happened because of me and my quirk. Daigoro raised an eyebrow at Izuku and he quieted. I thought I was quirkless, and because of that, weak. Given my existing heart condition, I was kept by myself for my own health, Yoichi explained. Izuku saw his hand tightened on Kuto's, who squeezed it back. When 2 and 3 found me, I was already dying. They helped me, and in return, I passed my quirk on to 2. I wasn't sure what it would do to him, how it would change him. He sighed, running his other hand over the wood grain on the table. When I died, I was here. Kuro sighed, looking over at Izuku. It was only after one died that I learned just how powerful his quirk was. It took mine, and it extended it. I was able to manipulate larger items. He paused before clearing his throat. It's hard to explain, but my quirk allowed me to change the speed of objects. I used it as bullets in fighting. Izuku nodded, and he continued. But the new power, it was more than I could use at a time, even for just my quirk. Before my fight with someone, he dragged the word out, looking at Yoichi, who nodded. I passed it on to 3, and from there, it grew. Bruce took over then. Before I died, I passed the power on. Again and again it passed through us, and each time one of us died, they ended up here. He gestured to the space, smiling slightly. It wasn't until 4 that we really learned just how powerful the quirk was. As the plane lapsed into silence, Izuku spoke up. A quirk can't be passed on to someone. It goes against all we know about quirks. They're genetic, predispositioned. It's not something you can choose. I didn't have a quirk. Izuku, no rambling right now. Nana said, reaching over to tap the table in front of him. Izuku jumped and nodded, biting his lip. When the quirk passes on, it takes the previous users with it, Hikage spoke, looking down at his hands. It takes it, and it grows. In return, it puts attacks on the user. It's too many quirks to control, much less to learn. I strengthened it to last longer for the user. I used all their quirks, and my own. But, he sighed, flipping his hand over and set his palm on the table. It killed me when I was only 40. It tore my body apart from the inside due to its power. It would have killed me sooner, Daigoro said, looking over to Izuku. But I was killed in battle, right before I could train my successor. We all fucking died, and spat out, but it wasn't in anger at anyone in particular. The quirk just kills you. Its power is too much for anyone to have. It shouldn't have existed in the first place. But it needed to, Nana said quickly. The quirk needed to exist, and because of its power, I couldn't pass it on to someone with a quirk. It would have killed them, so I didn't. She looked over to the hazy figure sighing. You know who it is already. Izuku looked between them before settling on Yoichi again. When the man nodded, he sat up more. So, you gave it to All Might. It is actually him. Yoichi nodded and Izuku grinned. But, he was quirkless? He finally figured it out, frowning slightly. I know it's widely debated, but All Might is the #1 hero, the symbol of peace. If the quirk could make him that, why do I have it? No one said anything as he glanced at the hazy figure, trying to figure it out. Everyone else had it passed to them, had it break them. Everyone else had their quirks, but he didn't. Why don't I have them? He whispered. With your quirks, I could do so much more. I could have made it into the hero course, even just one quirk. We don't get to choose if we have one or all the quirks, kid, Daigoro said softly. This is new for us too. All of it. Izuku turned to look at Yoichi, who nodded. He's right. We didn't know that 8 to All Might, he finally decided. We didn't know what he was passing the quirks on. We were too late to stop him, or to try to do anything. He should have died that day. With the quirk, it was time to end it all. Nana sighed, shaking her head. He's an idiot, kid. She glanced at the figure before looking away. He constantly puts himself in danger and tries so hard to do good, but all it did was kill him. The only reason he didn't die, he gave us to you. But how? It can only be guessed. There's no way to know for sure, Yoichi frowned. Do you recall just how young you were when you first switched out with 6? When Izuku hesitantly nodded, he continued. You would have died, instantly. You were still growing, still a child. You are a child. My quirk, it's not something we can just test. My guess is it protected you by splitting us from the quirks. We haven't felt a connection to them since that day, since we split in 2, and now you can see us, speak to us. None of us could do what you can. Izuku shook his head. But why? I'm not special, I'm not strong. If it passed to me to protect me, what happened to your quirks? They stayed with him, Kudo said softly. He still has them, all of them, and without us to cap their power. It's the only reason he survived. Izuku stood up, shaking his head. It didn't make sense. He had studied quirks all of his life and had never found anything like this. All Might had never mentioned it in any way in his hundreds of interviews. Izuku had seen every one of them 10 times over. He hadn't mentioned Nana or the fact his quirk must have gotten stronger. His borrowed quirk that Izuku now had. But how? He enunciated the word, stopping in his pacing to stare at Yoichi. How did I get you guys separated? I never even met All Might before UA, before the USJ. Sure, I've seen his fights, I saw a few in person, but I never touched him, never even spoke to him. Can it be passed without meaning to? Didn't you say it had to be DNA? I never... Izuku, Yoichi said softly. He was suddenly in front of Izuku, Kudo holding him up before he knelt in front of Izuku. Izuku glanced around, looking at them all, now on his carpet. You need to calm down. I promised we would explain, but there is just so much. Izuku nodded, sitting beside him as he tucked his legs up. He wanted to know all of this, needed to know it all. What did you mean by DNA? Nana sighed, motioning Izuku towards her. He nodded, moving to sit beside her. She wrapped an arm around his shoulder so he leaned into her. All Might is not all he is. You've seen in his fights. He had two forms, one more powerful than the other. Both grew in power when we left him. That's why you haven't recognized him. Yoichi nodded, running his hand over the carpet. His smaller form. It used to be even smaller. He could pass as a normal person, Izuku. I need you to think back to the first time you felt anything different. The first time you switched out with 6. Izuku shut his eyes, letting Nana gently rub his shoulder. He tried, before shaking his head. I can't. I was too young. You guys have always been here. Someone else touched his shoulder before he could open his eyes, and he gasped, stumbling away. He stared at him with a raised eyebrow before looking away, at the area around them. It was strange, though. The walls had shifted from their strange state into what looked like a church. He hadn't been in a church since... Oh, Izuku whispered as the environment shifted and shook. And there, in front of him, was a photo of a man he hadn't seen in years. A man who had his nose and his chin. That was what his mother had always said. A man who had died when he was just a child. His father stared at him from the frame, but as he stared at it, studying the man's details, everything shifted. Suddenly, it was no longer his father smiling through the frame, but it was him. That's... he whispered, stepping back. He shook his head, looking at the group as the walls returned to their never-ending open space. It's impossible. I was too young to remember. I'm remembering wrong. He tucked his arms around himself as he sat, staring at the carpet. It's not real. There's no way. Izuku, Yoichi said gently. We had no choice in it. None of us wanted him to do it. It is dangerous. But he did. He fell in love, and then you were born. That day, in the hospital, he asked you to eat a piece of his hair. His DNA. Izuku shook his head as he spoke, his fingers tightening in his skin. His father had died in that hospital. He could recall the sound of the steady beep and his mother's anguished tears, the way she held him all the way to the funeral a few days later, her soft shaking as she cried in the front row seat. And then he was here. Why? He whispered, looking up again. Why did he do it? Yoichi sighed, tapping Kudo's hand before glancing over at Bruce. People do stupid things when they're scared, and you are his blood. Have you ever wondered why you have such a strong connection to us? Why you can speak to us or switch us out? It's because of that fact. You are the Quirk now, Izuku, Kudo said softly. More so than one ever was. It runs through your veins and has since you were born. That's why you have such a connection to us. Why you can manipulate items here, Bruce cut in. He ran his fingers over the carpet as if to prove his point, his lips pressed in a line. But Izuku shook his head. No, he died that day. My father died. Nana nodded. He did, but All Might did not. His quirk just grew. That is the one thing he did. Leaving you and your mom. It was right of him to make her cry like that? Izuku snapped, looking over at her with a scowl. To have her spend nights in her room sobbing when she thought I was asleep. To just leave? The last word was pinched as Izuku tried to keep his anger in it, shaking his head. That's not what she meant, Daigoro sighed. Izuku. No, Izuku yelled. It's not true. He can't be alive. Be All Might. En clicked his tongue loudly, snapping Izuku out of his anger slightly. Grow the fuck up, kid. Your father is alive and is very much All Might. And yeah, it was the right choice to leave you and your mother. If you didn't, he leaned forward towards Izuku, it would have been her funeral that day. That's why it was stupid of him to fall in love. Izuku shook his head, biting his cheek. But she... Wake up, Izuku, Yoichi said softly as the room started to shake. We'll discuss this later. Izuku gasped, sitting up and coughing loudly. His entire body ached as he bent over, throwing up everything he had eaten recently into the trash can beside the bed. His head pounded as he gagged, trying to stop the nausea that threatened him again. Izuku! Kachan yelled, appearing by his side. He ran his hand over Izuku's back before handing him a cup of water. I couldn't wake you, Izuku. I thought something... He shook his head, sighing. Kachan, Izuku whispered, grabbing his hand as he went to back away. Kachan looked back over his shoulder, his eyebrows twisted in worry. Where's my mom? Kachan hesitated, looking around the empty room. She's not... Recovery girl can't get a hold of her. There... Izuku shook his head and he stopped talking, his frown growing. Izuku. He's my father, Izuku managed to choke out, and Kachan's eyes narrowed. He sat beside Izuku on the bed, rubbing his back slowly. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice pinched in worry. Izuku stared up at him, his vision blurry with the tears threatening to fall. His chest hurt and his head ached as he tried to force down everything. "All night is my father," and he broke into his friend's arms. Inko shifted her bag onto her hip, taking a deep breath. The apartment she was in front of was well manicured, though there was a pile of mail on the front porch. She stared down at the names, sighing. It was all too familiar. None of them had a clear name, just an address and no return address. It was all spam mail, sent to make the house look occupied. And it was. Inko knew who lived there, and she had hunted him down specifically for this. It wasn't all too hard. She had briefly spoken to Izuku's principal, and he was all too happy to pass over the address. It would have struck her as odd if she didn't know the stories of Nezu, if she hadn't been a student at his school herself. She should have been sitting in front of her television, watching Izuku on screen. She had tuned in on the train ride over, but this was her only time, before he went to the closing festival. She shook her head, raising a hand to knock. She tapped it gently twice before pausing and adding 3 more hits. She didn't even have time to take her hand away before she heard rustling inside. Something clattered and someone cursed before footsteps pounded for the door. She gripped the strap of her bag hard, fighting the urge to walk away. Shuzenji had tapped the same way in her office when she had worked with Izuku, so Inko hoped it was a code. She heard 5 locks click open and her breath caught in her throat. There, standing in front of her, was a man she hadn't seen in person for years. A man just as handsome as the day she had married him, his hair pushed out of his face, sweat beading his forehead. He was in simple clothes, but she would have known him no matter what he wore. She had loved him once upon a time. He stared at her, his mouth hanging open slightly as he leaned on the door. "I need to talk to you, Toshinori," she said, choosing to use his first name. He stuttered before nodding and stepping back politely. She moved under his arm into the apartment, if you could call it that. Other than the couch and TV, the room was bare, sparse decorations here and there. A small weight section sat in the corner, though she could see dust forming on it. She slipped her shoes off, setting them by the door. He hesitated, shutting the door gently behind her and sliding the locks into place. He went to say something, but she cut him off. "I backtracked 4 times. I took 2 different stations to get here, and I paused by the station. I remember how to do this, Toshinori." He nodded, swallowing loudly as she sighed. What are you doing here?" he whispered, not looking her in the eye. She frowned, walking over to the couch. She brushed away chip crumbs, waiting for him to join her. He eventually did, putting his hands in his lap as he stared at them. "We need to talk about Izuku," she said softly. He shook his head. "I already told you. I won't have any effect on him. I haven't tried to reach out. There's no way anyone could connect us." "Tsukuyuchi did," she cut in. "And your friend Shuzenji, not to mention our old principal, and whoever else is close to you now, Toshinori. Why did you come back to Japan?" He hesitated, standing up from the couch. "I thought we agreed to go no contact after my accident," he said, walking into the kitchen. "It wasn't an accident," she corrected. She remembered the phone call she had gotten that day, the fear when Izuku was in the room and his heart had flatlined. Her husband had died in that room. And no contact worked fine while you were in the States, and fine while Izuku was young, but he's in high school now, and you are training his best friend. His hands tightened on the fridge before he pulled it open. "I don't interact with him. He's not in the heroics class for a reason. Why I came back to Japan is not for you to know. Inko." "Don't Inko me," she said, though she didn't stand up, just taking a breath. "You've been watching us this whole time, getting your friends close to me. The only reason I have not left Japan is because it is Izuku's home, because you brought us back here. All those moves because of your job as a hero, and then you dumped me in Japan with our kid. You were never around. You never made an effort." He grabbed a water bottle, shutting the door as he leaned back on the counter, facing away from her. "I don't have anything to do with him," he repeated. "Tsukuyuchi was a coincidence. He didn't know I had a wife at the time of the incident. And Nezu would have learned one way or the other. Young Bakugou's training has nothing to do with Izuku's relationship to me." Inko tightened her grip on her bag, fighting to keep her cool. "What is your quirk, Toshi?" she finally asks, almost whispering the question. She made her way over to the counter to close the distance between them. He flipped around, his hands hitting the counter, though not too loud. She could recall him in the early days when they were married, his hair pulled back into a ponytail, an apron on as he laughed about some failed baked goods. She hadn't seen that since Izuku had been born. "My quirk is none of your concern, Inko," he said, his fist tightening. "I think it's time for you to go." Inko shook her head, slipping her bag off her arm to make her point clear. "Is there any way Izuku could have gotten your quirk?" she asked, leaning forward to face him. He may have been so much taller than her, but he always had been, and at one point they had been equals to one another. He narrowed his eyes as he shook his head. "No, there's no way," he confirmed, taking a quick drink of water. Inko reached forward, grabbing his hand from across the counter. "Please, Toshinori, this is serious now. If the time we spent together meant anything, I need to know. Don't let those years go to waste. Please." Toshinori shook his head, flipping his hand around to hold her hand. "There's no way," he confirmed. He hesitated before shaking his head. "No, there's no way, Inko. Can you tell me why you're worried about it now? I thought Izuku was diagnosed quirkless." Inko sighed, staring at him. He looked older now, more tired than he had when he would come home those few times. He looked the same as he did on her TV every day. "He's obsessed with you, you know. Always has been, ever since he first saw your debut video in my old discs." Toshinori nodded, laughing slightly. "I recall when he found that. It was hard to watch myself from that time. He never cared much for me when I was there, though." "That's because you were never there," she quickly corrected. "Can we just talk on the couch? There's so much you missed in his life, and while I know that neither of us want you back in his life, things have changed, and you need to understand why." He hesitated before nodding, dropping her hand. He walked around the counter, leading her to the couch instead. "You're just as beautiful as I remember, Inko," he said quietly as she sat down. She smiled slightly, nodding. "My love for you never left, but my concern is not for that, but for my child. I never wanted you to choose between us, but now I know, just as I did then, that a life as your kid was never one for Izuku. Thank you for leaving him." He nodded, smiling softly. "I would have died for you, Inko, just as I would for my career. I do appreciate all you did for me." She sighed, pushing down those old feelings she thought she'd worked through. "He has DID, at least." She sucked in a breath before reaching into her purse. Izuku's old drawings crumbled under her hands as she drew them out. "That's what the doctors told me, but—" She laid them across the small coffee table, tracing their familiar lines. She hadn't finished setting them all down when Toshinori reached forward, grabbing the one on top. It was of the woman, 7. It may have been an old drawing, but Izuku had always been skilled, even in middle school. "What are these?" Toshinori asked quietly, staring down at the picture in his hands. "They're Izuku's drawings," she said, finishing spreading out the pictures. "Drawings of his alters, his other identity. But they're more than that. It's—" She shook her head at a loss for words. Toshinori wasn't listening anyways. His thumb ran over the edge of the colored pencil lines. "There's no way," he repeated, the words quiet. Inko went to push him, to learn the truth. Right as she reached out for him, his phone rang. He dropped the photo with the others quickly, grabbing the phone off the counter. "Toshinori?" she asked, picking back up the discarded image. He looked at her, through her. His face was pale, his lips in a grim line. It was a look she hadn't seen from him in a long time. Not since she had told him she was pregnant. "You need to go," he said, and he was gone. The door slammed behind him, leaving her standing alone in the unfamiliar place. It was a feeling she had yet to grow used to. Standing alone, with no idea who to follow or where to go, left out of something that everyone knew but her. Okay, so this is the chapter that actually makes me excited to start writing more. Like, I'm going out of town tomorrow, actually. I'm going out of town tomorrow, and I have a lot of time to write. And like this is what I want to write. I really, really want to write those first interactions between Izuku and All Might, because it takes a little bit for them to actually interact with each other. Like, this is chapter 22. The fic's currently on 32, so like it takes that time for them to meet, but that is important time. But oh my gosh, I'm so excited for it. So a lot of my fics I do All Might bashing. I'm not the biggest fan of him. There's a lot of flaws I don't like about him, but you know, whatever. But this one is the one where I'm like, okay, I do not want to All Might bash. I do not want to All Might bash. I do not want to All Might bash, because he is such all characters in My Hero Academia are so dang complex. And like, if I can see redemption in a character like Shigaraki, I feel like I can see redemption in a character like All Might. Despite my original like disdain for the man. But yeah, Izuku learns more information. I won't say all of it because he didn't learn about All for One or how any of them really died. But he did learn a little bit more, and he knows All Might is now his father. And, of course, Katsuki knows by extension. We got Inko. Oh, I love Inko. She's such a protective mom, and she's trying so hard to look out for him. But, she really can't, because she doesn't know anything either, because everyone has to keep her out of it. And, I'm so excited to write her, like, finally understanding what the Vestiges are, because I feel so bad for this poor mom. She's trying so hard. Anyways, the next chapter is called Truths and Time. Thank you all so much for listening. This is probably my last one recorded on the 11th. I don't know.